the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. And this week, as I say, every week, we have a very special guest. This week, we have Hamied Haroon, who's going to be our guest with us this week. And Hamied, I'm not going to steal your thunder, right? But Hamied is a very special man as far as I'm concerned, because he's overcome so many obstacles to get to where he is right now. And I'm not gonna say anymore. I'm gonna let Hamied tell us his story. So Hamied, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to have you with us this afternoon. Can you tell us a little bit about your early childhood and how you gained your sense of identity and sense of belonging?
Sure. Thank you so much for this invitation, Wayne, to be part of this. It's great to be here and to see so many people join as well. So let me see. My family are from Pakistan. So my parents are both kind of born there. My mum came over when she was about 4 or 5 years old, I think. She came to England, to London. She remembers the journey on the ship from Karachi, which is the port of Pakistan, all the way through the Suez Canal up to London. She remembers the ship very well, and the smells of food and people and stuff. She remembers that. And my dad, he came over much later on, a much more mature age, to marry my mum, in fact. So he came over for that. My mum was kind of an artist, more. She did teach training before getting married. And she was very interested in children with special needs, actually, in her training.
Yeah.
And my dad, he had a degree in science, in biology, but he found himself working in a bank, in a Pakistani bank. So when he came over, he continued to do that. So that was my mum and dad. I'm the eldest child. I was the first one born. And then I have a brother and 2 sisters after me. Right. But my mum and dad kind of gave us a very traditional kind of Pakistani culture and environment in our home. And all of my mum's family have lived here in the UK, in London particularly, for ever since they came over here. So we always had very strong ties with my mum's family, with my mum's parents and their brothers and sisters and all the cousins, and huge family that we were kind of belonging to, if you like. So that sense of identity was being Pakistani, being a Muslim, and being brought up in that culture. But then at the same time, living here in the UK, I was born in Preston, lovely Preston. And then we moved to Manchester when I was 2. And I've lived in Manchester for all of my life since then, educated here and everything. But I have a genetic condition that's called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, although it has nothing to do with the dental work. So it's a neuropathy that affects my peripheral nerves. So I've got floppy hands, legs that don't really work. So actually science is something that has supported my life actually since a very early age. So I wear calipers, which are engineered. It's incredible engineering for somebody who can't stand up on their own 2 feet. I put these calipers on and, well, hey, I can stand up, which is amazing. And I used to walk so much when I was younger. I can't do it much more now. And I use a powered wheelchair now, which again is a feat of engineering that gives me so much independence and control to get about. So yeah, anyway, sorry.
No, carry on.
I'm blabbering, Wayne, just tell me to stop, please. So I was diagnosed with this genetic condition when I was about, I think, 4 years old, maybe even sooner than that.
Yeah.
So the only school I could go to was a special school. It was in probably the richest part of Manchester,
Right.
which is called Didsbury. Very green, very leafy. All the old retired people, the rich ones that live there, and are very white as well. And that's where I went to school for all my primary school years. And it was, yeah, it was really interesting, the kind of mix of cultures. So I had the Pakistani, very traditional Pakistani culture from home, but then at school you have the very British culture, very kind of white culture, if you like, of being at school. But also the difference in the expectations from me as a disabled child. So my mother would always push me and tell me, no, you can do this. You've got to do this. In fact, there's no choice. You've got to drive yourself forward. Whereas my dad may be more inclined to the kind of traditional kind of viewpoint, and the community as well, the kind of Pakistani community, especially in the mosque environment, not really expecting much from a disabled child. That they're not really going to amount to much. So, let's just be nice to them and ask them for their prayers, because God will listen to them more, and they'll be a righteous person. They'll get us through to heaven or something. So there was kind of that viewpoint from the family and home environment, whereas at school, because I went to a special school and there were all disabled children there. There weren't any other kinds of children there. We were all disabled, so it's like, you're no special princess. Get on with it, kind of thing. And you were taught, how to make the best of being disabled.
Yeah.
Get on with life. Learn the skills you need to learn to manage and get through.
So you've kind of like mentioned that your mother kind of like did have an interest in special needs when she was doing her training, right? And then you also mentioned the fact that your father had a science degree or had science background, science education before going into work in the bank and stuff like that. So your passion, because I'm going to go on to talk about your science and stuff, but what in the school environment, what was it that helped you to migrate towards the sciences, maths and English? Was it what helped you in that sense?
So at the special school, we were more involved in things like wheelchair dancing and sports competitions and stuff like that. With other special schools around Manchester and beyond as well. But actually, when I got close to the end of my primary school years, I got really lucky. Wayne, at that time, Manchester decided that disabled children who could, that showed potential, should be integrated into mainstream high school at that time.
Right.
And there was only one accessible high school in Manchester at that time, the only one with lifts and support workers. And it was probably one of the roughest high schools there was. But going to high school, and you know how all the subjects are split apart.
Yeah.
You're doing science because you go to science class, you're doing maths. So there is where I really kind of found my passion for science and for math, and kind of understood more what those subjects were, and kind of gained that enthusiasm for studying, and kind of found a kind of natural affinity towards those subjects as well, that I could do them and love them. But of course, as I mentioned to you before, Wayne, it was things like Star Trek and Tomorrow's World and just brilliant programs that were on TV at that time that really kind of blow your mind and think, this is what you could do with science.
So your passion kind of like was one, starting to get to understand the different subject areas, but also that curiosity, that excitement, that fascination of the potential that science and engineering could do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, those programs particularly. So, like Tomorrow's World, for instance, way back then they were talking about mobile phones, but they at that time they were bricks, right? They were so huge. But like, you know, looking into the future and you know, with Star Trek, right? And Dr. McCoy and his little probe, and he could like, you know, wave it over someone, diagnose their illness, whatever they were ailing from, give them a tablet, and they'll be fine, absolutely cured. So it was things like that, like, you know, just how far can we get? How can we push the boundaries of human discovery and human achievement as well? You know, if we don't bind ourselves, if we don't kind of restrict ourselves in our imagination,
Yeah.
there's so far we could go. But science allows us to kind of understand who we are, where we are, you know, what our surroundings are made of, and that study, I think it's just so critical to so many, in so many ways.
Absolutely. I love the way that you describe it as kind of like a passion of endeavor, in terms of how we can work together to make something better. Yeah, there's nothing that if we imagine it, we can probably do it in some way. It might take us a little time, but we can do it. So for you then, when you went through this through high school, what were you hoping to do? Science was something which was a passion, but did you have role models? Did you see anybody who you thought, actually, I could follow in their footsteps? Were there any role models? What did you want to do as a youngster?
So I really suppose I was inspired by characters like Dr. McCoy, but I really wanted to become a medical doctor,
Right.
somebody who could cure people, and maybe in a kind of strange way, cure myself as well, if you like.
Yeah.
So medicine was really what I wanted to get into. That was my driver for science as well, and my kind of curiosity in that field. But when I got to the stage where you kind of seek careers advice, everybody put me off. It was like, how are you going to do medicine? How are you going to be a doctor as a disabled person in a wheelchair? You know, how are you going to race from one side of the hospital to the other when there's an emergency situation? You know, how are you going to deal with all of those things? But at that time, Wayne, there was nobody kind of, in my view, nobody I knew of who was disabled and was practicing medicine, you know, at that time. So I really didn't have any role models really to go on at that time. So I had nothing to kind of back up my passions at that time. Although I still I remember I was telling my mum about it, and my mum said, "Ah, never mind." She said she said in like typical Pakistani style, "It's okay if you can't be a doctor. You could be a lawyer instead. You could do that. You'll still earn lots of money." It's like, no, I don't think so, Mum. That's not what I want to do. You know, I want to stick with science, and so I decided to keep with it. And sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So, with all of these naysayers, everybody saying that you can't do it, what was your next option? What clearly you didn't give up. So, what was your next option, and how did you get there?
Yeah. So so I decided science was for me. You know, even if I couldn't do medicine, I was going to pursue science. So my mum took me for. So I got the best GCSE grades out of my year. I got in my school, which wasn't a hard thing because it was a rough place. But I went then to college to enroll for my A levels, and my mum took me and she told me which subjects I should take. I should take, psychology, I think she wanted me to do, and law and something else. So I managed to get into the college by myself without my mum. And I signed up for all, the sciences I wanted to do. So I did physics, biology, and maths. And when they saw my GCSE grades, they were kind of like, yeah, do whatever you want to do, the college people were saying, like, enroll for whatever. So that was fantastic. And then in those courses, in the physics teacher's class, he was a great guy as well, the physics teacher. But on his bookshelf, there was a book that said medical physics. And I had never heard of this kind of field of study before. So I took this book away and read it. And I was just like, wow, this is like, it was like, a ball of lightning from heaven. It's like, whoa, this is incredible. So I don't have to be a doctor to enter the field of medicine. I could get in by being a physicist, by being a scientist, and doing it that way. So that's what I decided to do. I thought, yeah, this is for me. I want to do medical physics.
Fantastic. So, I just want to not digress a little bit, but just to find a little bit more about how your sense of belonging was. Because you said that you went to this school, right? How were you treated by your peers at that time in the school? Were they encouraging of you? How did they treat you as a young disabled guy? How were they?
So it was a big change going from a special school where all the kids were disabled and mostly white as well.
Yeah.
I think I was one of very few who was non-white, and then going to a mainstream high school in an area that was very there were many more Asians and black people living there, and they came to the school. So it was a very different kind of environment. So I felt a bit more belonging in terms of my race, if you like.
Yeah.
And in terms of religion as well, because there were more Muslims in the school. But, in terms of being disabled, there was only me and two other people in my year who were wheelchair users, who were disabled. Everybody else was so-called normal. In the year. Other years after me, more disabled kids were coming to the school, but I think we were the first, or one of the first years where we had disabled kids. So there was a lot that the school needed to change to become accessible as well. So it's never just the case you need lifts or ramps. There's more to it than that. So the school really progressed, using us as guinea pigs in a way, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, doing it that kind of way. So, it was weird, but I really struggled to begin with, actually, in terms of accessibility in the school, because there were no support workers to begin with. I had to wait ages for any kind of support I needed.
Wow.
And they promised me a computer, typewriter and stuff, and that took forever to come. But yeah, I really struggled to begin with, actually, and had to cope by myself for ages before the school had things in place.
So they didn't really make any reasonable adjustments for you at the start. Was that the case, or it took time?
So the adjustments were the plan, but it took ages for the plan to come into action. But yeah, they kind of sold themselves to me and my parents to begin with. But then when you got there, it was a slightly different story. But at the same time, I loved high school. I just loved everything about it. I mean, this might sound strange as a person who likes science, but every year there was like what do you call it, concerts, not concerts, plays. They used to have performances and things at the school, and I didn't get involved, but I really enjoyed watching those. And like there was so many kids there who had musical talents and acting talents and, amazing stuff like that, even though they came from broken families or rough backgrounds.
Yeah.
You could see how like talented they were inside, and they brought that out in these performances and things. So I loved all of that about high school.
Fantastic. So I'm going to pull us back again to when you went to university, when you got your A-level grades and decided to go to university. What subject did you pick and why did you choose that? So, of course, we'd already kind of like established about the medical physics element. So what did you go on to do, and what adjustments were made or weren't made for you going into that field?
So to do medical physics, I found out that I had to do a degree in physics to begin with. So that's what I chose to do at university, and thankfully I got the grades from my A-levels to be able to do that. So I went to what was called UMIST at that time. It's all part of the University of Manchester now, but it was one of the best scientific kind of universities, science-focused universities around where I was. And I've been really lucky actually to live in Manchester, where we've got great institutions just on our doorstep here. So educationally it's been amazing. So I went to UMIST, but there were lots of problems. It was so difficult throughout the course. Actually, it wasn't very accessible. It wasn't very inclusive at all. I couldn't really access the labs properly. All the benches were always too high, for me. Even the lecture theatres, I used to have to park my wheelchair outside the lecture theatre and walk as much as I could to the front benches to sit down there, because there was no space inside the lecture theatre for the wheelchair. And of course you need to make notes and stuff, so there was no way to be in a wheelchair and have a desk space to write on. So that's what I'd have to do. But then I'd struggle writing as well, because I've got weakness in my hands. So often I'd just take my friends' notes and photocopy them, because I couldn't keep up with the lecturers. And that kind of thing. But even then, sitting in the lecture theatre, I couldn't sit with people I wanted to sit with. I'd have to sit at the front of the lecture theatre always. But doing a physics degree was great, but there was a real clash of culture as well. Is it all right to talk about that? You want to?
Yeah.
So it was, so in my opinion, my humble opinion, I think the white community, well, most of them anyway, kind of have a tendency of taking ownership of science, like science belongs. That kind of colonial kind of take, if you like. I don't mean to offend anybody. This is just what the kind of experience I've had, and kind of feelings I get sometimes. So even during the degree course, when my fellow students wanted to get together to study together, it would always be in the pub, and that would be inaccessible to me, but also very uncomfortable for me, being a Muslim and being around alcohol, which they always wanted to be. Any social or study event would always have alcohol as part of the equation, and that used to be so frustrating. Why mix those things together? If we're going to talk science, let's talk science. Why does it have to be in the pub? You could do your pub thing afterwards if you want to. But that was always an uncomfortable situation. And even lecturers, one lecturer came into the lecture and actually had a can of beer with her, and she put the hand out onto the bench, and she kind of hit the can of beer on the bench, and like beer was like coming out of the can, like spraying out of the can, all over the handout sheets. And then she gave them out to us in the lecture, and it was like, I don't even want to touch that.
Yeah.
So a real insensitivity of what other people's cultures or values are around things.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were many kind of obstacles in the way, but thankfully I got through just about and got a degree.
I think you did more than just about, because you then went on to do a master's, and was it in medical physics?
It was in medical physics, but hold on a minute. So I forgot to tell
sorry.
you something. During my first year of university, there was an election for the Students' Union, and I was elected as the Disability Access Secretary. So the Students' Union was like the worst building for access. There was no lift in there that you could use to get to the top floor, which is where all the union activities were.
Right.
Like the council meetings and all of that stuff. So people literally had to carry me in my wheelchair up flights of stairs to get me to stuff. Even for exams, they'd have to do that because sometimes they were on that top floor. It was crazy. So when the RAG were organizing a bungee jump event, they encouraged me to do a bungee jump. Can you believe that? So on the side of the main road in the university campus, there was me doing a bungee jump, right, 180 feet up in the air on this crane, on a green, in my wheelchair. And it stopped like the buses on the side of the road. They were watching this crazy guy. What the heck is he doing in his wheelchair doing this bungee jump? But yeah, that was to raise awareness of inaccessibility and just how bad it was. But yeah.
I love the way that you transitioned that to give that story, because for some, I'm able-bodied, and I'll be honest with you, the idea of jumping off, even with the things, kind of like, I'm thinking, whoa, right? But you did that to help raise awareness about disability and accessibility, or the lack there, because people aren't aware of the difficulties. There was a case earlier on this week about going through the airport and things like that. So what was it that, other than the fact that you had recognized the struggles which you had in going around the university campus, people will say, okay, it's a struggle to get around, but what was it that kind of like made you say, well, I want to lend my voice to this campaign. I want people to understand what it's like. What was it that got you to say, let me raise my voice in this way?
Well, it was because there was so few of us at that time. I think I was the only wheelchair user, even in my physics class. And it was like, if you don't put yourself out there sometimes, then the story doesn't get told. People don't hear what the experiences are of others, I feel like. And if you don't shout about it, if you don't make some noise about it, if you don't do something about it, nothing's going to change, really. So you can talk about things, if you like, with people, and do things in a soft way, if you like. But sometimes screaming about things, if you like, is the way to get heard. Sometimes doing a bungee jump, for example, or doing something crazy and outrageous, where you get your picture in the local press, and they think you're as nuts as everybody else thinks. That helps to raise that awareness. People want to know, what is this nuts guy doing? Why? What's the purpose of it, and what they're going through? So then they listen more to that thing. But like, things were not changing on the campus, even with people having to carry me up flights of stairs. University was taking no notice of that.
Yeah.
Even though it was a huge health and safety risk.
Yeah.
But at the time they weren't really that bothered. So yeah, doing the bungee jump made them listen.
So, was there any tangible results or tangible changes which happened as a result of you taking that almost like direct action in a kind of like jumping out of a plane kind of way, a bungee jump kind of way? So did it get the attention that you needed?
So I didn't have the full result I was after, which was just for the university to install a lift in that building and make it more accessible. But it did make them commit to do something in the near future, whatever that meant. So yeah, they had to make some kind of commitment because it got into the press.
Yeah.
And because the press went to the university and said, this crazy guy's just done this, you know, what's your response?
Yeah.
So they had to respond in some way. And that was it.
You know what? It brings me back to what you said about when you went into secondary school, that there was the plan there, but there was no execution. And here again now, you've said, well, actually, I may as well just jump out of a plane, or I may as well do a bungee jump because I'm not getting the accessibility that I need to continue my studies. And that then jolted them into, this is how I'm interpreting it. Maybe I'm connecting the wrong things, but it just seems it just seems that's how it's all connected, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, for me, being a disabled person, so what we have is what we call the social model of disability, which I learned later on in life. But the social model of disability saying that it's not us that's the problem, right? So you have this medical model that says that we need to be cured, we need to be made normal, you know, in some way. But the social model of disability says that actually we are disabled by society, by the attitudes and the stereotypes and the stigma. You know, the lack of access and communication, bad transport, these all make us disabled. And disability is like it's almost like what would you call it? The disabilities like oh well, it's a discrimination, right, against us. Because we have impairments, we have illnesses or whatever, but it's society that disables us. So this thing you know actually gives me pride in being a disabled person. So then that pride I like to bring out in doing these kind of things. That pride kind of bubbles up then, because often we're not seen in society. We're not seen for the contributions we make and for the part we play already in so much of society. Sorry, I'm rambling on.
No. You're making a very valid point in that actually those, if reasonable adaptations aren't made, right, that society does disable you, because there are things which you can do, and it's just that we need a slightly different support. So it's not about, it's kind of like that, the argument between equality and equity. Exactly. So when you say we give everybody the same thing, but not everybody needs the same thing. Sometimes we need to give something different in order for them to be able, or for others to be able to achieve the same. Exactly. It's so that equity of being able to access and to be able to fulfill your potential, that shouldn't be something that you have to demand. That should be something that is automatically given. Exactly. But you had to demand it on more than one occasion. Your story.
And we still have to demand it. It's not automatically given. We you know have to fight every day, if you like, for this belonging in society. You know what?
we're already almost out of time, believe it or not, and there's so much more that I want to talk to you about. So I'm not going to pick up the pace. I'm going to just carry on talking, right?
Okay.
But you then went on not just getting your degree and your master's. You then went on and did a PhD. Where did that come from? Did you see any other people who kind of like had disabilities who were doing PhDs, or what was it that kind of like inspired you to say, you know, I want to do this next? What was it?
So I think it was that passion to just keep studying as well, keep learning, and through the MSc, I found out about magnetic resonance imaging and what that could kind of provide, what that could offer. Within the brain, right. Sorry, have I cut out?
Well, yeah, just slightly, but you're back now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, my internet is really rubbish sometimes. But so yeah, MRI that we learned about in the MSc course are just like the beautiful, exquisite pictures you can get from inside the brain and the body without having to touch a person with a knife, right? And you know what you could access using MRI. So that was kind of like the field I wanted to get into. And then I found out about these supervisors that were, kind of offering PhD proposals in this area. So I just emailed them and went along and had a chat with them. And the supervisors I got, they were the first ones I talked to. And they were so supportive. They completely like looked beyond me being a disabled person. Maybe because I'd got through the degree, I'd got through my master's, you know, and now I was coming for a PhD. But they were so supportive. They made it possible for me to start my PhD. You know, we chatted about what the PhD would be on, and I was just like, I was mesmerized. It's like, yeah, this is fantastic. And it was all about MRI in diagnosing cancer and monitoring treatment of cancers as well. And it was just like, yeah, I want to do this, and I want to do it with you guys. So they were two quite old white professors, but so supportive and so understanding as well. And made it possible for me to get through. I took longer than most people do to do their PhD. So it took me, I think, 4-5 years maybe to finish my PhD. But they were the ones who looked for the funding to keep my fees going.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a studentship. It was all kind of self-funded, if you like.
Wow.
And that's because I lived at home and because
Yeah.
my parents supported me the whole way through.
Yeah.
And yeah, they encouraged me to do it. So,
I was going to come back. I was going to come back to that notion or that idea that Crystal, you're very right. That's what I said to him yesterday when he said, "Oh, it took longer," and he said 4.5 years, and I said, "You know what? That's about standard." So, absolutely. But in terms of, there was a question, there was something which you said earlier on, which was about the fact that the community are almost like the stereotypes within the community is that because you had a disability, you're not going to really amount to much. So I want to come back to that kind of notion as then you here now standing at the university, or you know, in your position at the university, having now completed your PhD. What was the response of your family, your friends, the community about this achievement that you had done?
So I think the first point was actually getting my GCSEs and
Yeah.
getting the kind of best in my school, you know, the really good GCSE grades I got. My mother was so proud, she actually backed up the car, our car into a bollard and just smashed up the lights on the back. She was so happy, so delighted. But it actually proved to everybody else, to the community, if you like, and to the family, the wider family too, that, you know, I could do it, and there was something in me. But that was the first point of proving myself. And if you like, it was, you know, every step. Then, you know, going to A levels and then degree and then whatever. It was a point of proving myself that, you know, this is possible. I can do this. Even if I am disabled, I still have that passion to achieve, and I want to, and I can. So yeah, it was really proving a point, and really changed actually many attitudes.
Yeah.
And I found I found people respecting me a bit more, if you like. Not that I want to be arrogant in any way, but, you know, do you get what I mean? It's that kind of
I
feeling.
know. Yeah. Yeah. You see, the funny thing about it is because you've got a physical disability, sometimes people equate a physical disability with a mental disability, to say that if you can't, because just because my hands don't move the way that your hands doesn't mean that my brain can't function in the same way, or even in a more advanced way, you know.
Yeah,
and it's that kind of, and it goes back to what you were saying about the societal impact on your disability. It's what we view and what we perceive and what we ascribe onto people, which is problematic.
yeah, absolutely. And, you know, later on I found out about some incredible role models in science. For instance, Professor Stephen Hawking, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's passed away now. He didn't believe in God, so I can't say God rest his soul. But he was a great guy, and he was so profoundly impaired and disabled. But I think he was very lucky, though, as well, that he was in an institution that supported him so much. And he wasn't always disabled. He became disabled while he was at university. So he kind of proved himself already a bit, and got that support he needed. But still, it shows that somebody who's so physically, who's so kind of unable to do anything except move his eyes, and, you know, he's discovered these theories in physics of the black holes and time, and all of these incredible kind of philosophical kind of arguments and things in physics that nobody else has come up with. Nobody else had thought of these things before.
Yeah.
But, you know, there we go, a disabled scientist who did actually, if I mention this, did appear on an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. He did, as himself, of course. But yeah, and his computer and the artificial voice that comes from his computer are so iconic to Stephen Hawking, and what a role model he is. So yeah, it just goes to show, you know, if you've got that support you need and the accessibility to do it, you know, who can't achieve? Everybody has that in them.
I'm just wary of time, but normally I would open it up for if any questions from guests, from anyone who's, if they have a question. I'm going to open it for a few minutes, but you're going to have to be quick because there's still a couple of things which I'd still like to ask you, right? So if anyone does want to ask any questions, put your hand up or put it in the chat and we'll get to it. But I'm just thinking about your role in terms of kind of like how you promote. You still don't know what medical physics is, right? Crystal, All right. I'm gonna explain medical physics, and then I'm gonna move on to my next question. So, if you could give us a quick rundown on what medical physics does.
So medical physics is just generally the application of physics to medicine. So there are different ways that could be approached. You could have understanding the physics of how the body works, for instance, how your eyes see, with light, how your heart beats with electrical waves that are propagated. How you walk even, there's physics around that. But then there's another side of medical physics, which is on medical imaging. So that's the side that I work on. And that's developing techniques with physics to look inside the body and take quantitative measurements. So actually be able to measure how the body is structured and functions, and metabolism and stuff like that go on in the living body. That can be used for diagnosis of various conditions, and to understand how we work. So that's, in a kind of nutshell, that's medical physics, if you like. It's a very broad, very, very wide field. It is very interesting, Chris. Absolutely.
Fantastic. I'm going to just push on a little bit. If there are any more questions, I've dropped them in the chat. Put your hand up and I'll come to you. But I just wanted to find out, because your activism can you tell us a little bit more about what you've done to kind of like highlight what's happened, not just to you, but to other people with disabilities, and to try to get better representation, etc.
Sure, yeah. So when I finished my PhD, so when I stopped being a student, I mean, as a student, you get excellent support from the university. At Manchester University, particularly, we have a great support service when it comes to students. But then when I finished my PhD and got my job, my first job as a research associate in the same department, suddenly all that support disappeared, because there was no such support for staff, for disabled staff at the university. And that was really weird. And because I was I think the only visibly disabled person anyway, in my department, so I didn't, that sense of belonging, I didn't really get that at that time. And I felt very alone, actually. But then the university, luckily, had to bring together everybody who had disclosed, I hate that word, but disclosed their disability, brought everybody together, because they had to write a disability equality scheme. There was something in the law at that time to do. So for the first time, when we all came together, the first time I saw other disabled colleagues from across the university, who I never knew existed. And that sense of belonging kind of, percolated from that time. It's like, wow, there are others. From that point, we established our disabled staff network at the university, one of the first at a university across the whole country, in fact. And the first thing we did was to campaign for support services for staff, disabled staff, that would sit alongside the expertise already there for disabled students.
Yeah.
So I had to do this meeting with the vice chancellor. I was nervous as heck, and I had to do I was told that he loved SWOT analyses, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that he loved those. So I had to put that together about the experiences of disabled staff and present this to him, because I became chair of the Disabled Staff Network from the get-go. I don't know how. So yeah, I had to meet him and I had to do this presentation. He was such a nice guy, and he understood exactly what I was talking about to him. Yeah. He saw where the gap was, and he took that opportunity and he just made it happen. that we had
Fantastic.
support for disabled staff at our university. Again, I think one of the first universities to offer any such thing for disabled staff across the whole country. So
Fantastic.
yeah, the years went by and we did other great things. And then in 2014, we held a national conference for disabled staff from higher education institutions across the country. We had about 100 people come to Manchester. It was the only sunny day of that year, fortunately. And we all got together in Manchester for that conference. And because we had so many people come from all over the place, that's where I launched the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks.
Yeah.
Because we're all facing similar challenges in our own institutions and across the sector and other sectors even. So, it was a great opportunity to form that association, and we've been going ever since. So next year will be our 10th anniversary, in fact.
Wow. Wow.
And one thing we're working on right now, Wayne, is looking at something, like you got the Athena Swan Charter Mark for gender equality, and then you got the Race Equality Charter Mark. So we want something on disability.
Yes.
Something better than what's out there, because what's out there right now isn't designed for the higher education environment. So we want something that is tailored to our experiences as disabled staff in higher education. So we're working hard on trying to create something around that with other organizations. But yeah.
So, because I know that Imperial, we have a staff network called Able, who, and they do quite a lot of stuff as well. My question to you is, how can everybody get involved in helping to raise the profile, make a difference, make the adjustments? What kind of things do you think that we need to be doing to support you more?
Wow. So I think listening to people, trying to be understanding of, because disability is not always a visible thing. There is much disability that's invisible, many impairments that are hidden, such as that includes mental health conditions, chronic illnesses, like I have Crohn's disease as well. So conditions like that, you never know until you talk to somebody about they want to share it with you about these things. So being open as well, from your own point of view and looking, disability, I think is 1 in 5 working age people in our population identify as being disabled. So that can affect people in all sorts of ways. It doesn't mean that you yourself are disabled. Maybe somebody in your family is, maybe somebody you know is. And just understanding those experiences and being open and talking and listening to others is so important. And being a good ally. If you don't identify as being disabled yourself, then listening to others. And one really important thing is around how vital it is for us to think about intersectionality. So how our different identities intersect and play out with each other. So a disabled man's experiences will be very different. So mine, for instance, are very different to my sister, who's a disabled woman. And Black disabled people have a very different experience to white disabled people, and etc. It goes on. But these are the uniqueness of our own characters and our own experiences that matter so much.
Right. I'm going to ask you my final question. You've been absolutely brilliant, insightful. It's just amazing. I literally could talk to you all day long, right? Because your passion for what you do and for overcoming challenges is just brilliant. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask my final kind of like double-headed question. right? You can answer either both or you can answer one. The question is, what advice would you have given to your younger self, your 16-year-old self, that when he was going to choose his A levels, what advice would you have given him? And what do you think he would have looked up at and said, looking at you now and said, wow, wow?
Oh my God. So I don't think I would say anything to my younger self, actually. I'd just let him get on with it and get to where he is now. You know what I mean? You know, because it's been a very fortunate, very lucky journey in many ways to get to where I am right now. And yeah, I don't know if there would be anything I could say to him to make the journey any better. I think it's been cool. But in terms of that wow thing, you know, for the past couple of years, I've been serving on the diversity committee for the Royal Society. The Royal Society, right? And just like recently, I actually visited the Royal Society. And do you know where it is? It's just down the road from Buckingham Palace, from where King Charles's digs are. It's like, whoa, you know, what am I doing here? Right? This is crazy. So I still have that wow factor. It's like, you know, I can't believe some of the things I get involved in. And it's just that thing that people are so welcoming and want to, you know, kind of, well, like you, Wayne, you know, welcoming me to this and talking to me in such a friendly way. It's like, you know, I've known you forever, it feels like, Wayne. But, you know, these kind of opportunities are just incredible. I'm loving it.
All I can say is, as I said, the work which you've done and the work in highlighting the struggles, or highlighting the lived experiences, and that's what we're talking about, those lived experiences of people who do have disabilities, right? But the disabilities are oftentimes societal made. We may have a physical disability, but it's how society responds means, does it actually disable you or does it empower you, you know? And for a lot of what I've seen you do, you've used it as a tool of empowerment. Jumping out of, or doing a bungee jump, that's empowering you, because you're saying, I'm not allowing me being in a wheelchair to stop me doing and highlighting this thing. You're empowering. So I just commend you for all that you are doing, and I want you to continue, and know that you have a platform here anytime, absolutely anytime. All right.
Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to, there's so many words of wisdom in the chat. I'm going to let you see them afterwards, but it's been really wonderful having you as a guest. I'm going to just share what we have on for next week. And next week, again, we have another incredible guest. We have Professor Priscilla M. Reddy, who is a behavioral scientist who's been working in the fight against HIV and AIDS, about tobacco control and adolescent health in South Africa. But she's done so much more. And she's going to be our special guest next week. And it also marks Women at Imperial Week. So I'm really looking forward to having our interview with her next week as well. And if you haven't seen any of our other interviews, then please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, where you'll be able to see many more interviews, hear many more stories, and gain some really incredible insight. So until we meet again next week, I just want to thank all of the many wonderful guests that we've had, and thank all of those who are tuning in and listening to their stories. We all belong when we find that place where we can say that we are who we are. So once again, thank you all, and I will see you again next week.